Good morning. Today is July 24th, and it's the 42nd day of being on the road. And since we really don't have a push of getting anywhere, I've got Jim convinced into giving you a little bit of a tour of the combine. There's been several people asking if Jim would explain his combine, so we're going to try it. Okay, so as soon as Jim gets ready, we'll get this tour started.
Good morning, YouTube friends. I've been coerced into doing this. Tracy says some of you guys have been wanting to know more about the combine and how things work. So I'm gonna run through here. Not super fast, not super slow, but just kind of give you a rundown on how things work. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a mechanic. I'm just a guy who's had a combine for almost 40 years, so bear with me. I'm gonna start here at the header. It's a MacDon made in Canada. In this thing, I've decided to just start at the front. Bear with me. I know a lot of you guys know about combines and know a lot more than I do. But I'm going to kind of take this as somebody who don't really know much about them, and if you're interested in how it works, I'm going to show you real quick, and I'm going to start at the front here. And so, Tracy, you get up here, and I want to get a shot of these stationary things right here I'm putting my fingers on. They're called the guards. They're stationary. These things right here with the points on them, individually, there's 4 of them per foot. They're called the sickle sections. This is moving back and forth, and so as the grain goes in here, if my finger was a piece of grain, it's going like this and it scissors it off. This goes, I'll just say, really fast, and it will cut, it'd cut body parts off in an instant. It won't cut through a piece of chain or a piece of iron. But this is where the cutting starts. This thing here is called the reel. It goes round and round and gets the crop, as the crop is cut off, it lays it on this long belt that is rolling. It moves the material to this center belt. The center belt moves the material back to that auger, which rotates. The fingers, well, you guys, if you don't know what fingers are called, those shiny round objects we call fingers. As the auger rotates, the fingers help grab the crop, and it started heading into the combine. So very quickly, that's how we get a shot from one end to the other, Tracy. That's how we get the crop cut and get it started into the combine. We're done with our jobs. When the jobs are typically done, we try to clean everything up the best we can. So the header is sitting on a header trailer. This is for transport purposes. You can pull it with a pickup or pull it with a truck or what have you. And the combine then is over here. I'm not totally done cleaning it off, but I'm to a point where Tracy wanted to do this, so it's not really 100% clean yet, but I've been working on it. Okay, so we're cleaning on this thing yesterday, and by cleaning it, we didn't get muddy, so it's not going to get washed. And I've got an air compressor, so you wait for a day that you got some wind, and to keep the wind to your back, so when you're blowing crap, it's all blowing away from you. I've got most of the shields off so I can check things, inspect belts, just see if I can see anything about ready to fall off, which it's not, but that's how I say it. But anyway, so I can get a good look at what's going on. So anyway, that header, which I was thinking of this is rather interesting. Correct. Our friends in Australia call the header the front, and they call the combine the header, which which I find rather interesting, because here in the States, what's behind me is the header, and this is the combine. But to our Australian friends, that's the front, and this is the header. It's just some fun information. The header hangs onto the front of this combine here. We call this the feeder house, and the crop all starts in here, and this rotates, so the crop is fed underneath here, and it starts heading into the combine. And back in this area, then, there is another rotating device that as the crop is fed in this feeder house, there's a beater shaft, I don't know what else to really call it, that gets it started into the rotors. This is a New Holland combine, and they invented the twin rotor design. We've got two almost horizontal thrashing devices that, bear in mind, guys, I'm not telling you anything exact. I'm telling you things in very general terms. We've got these two rotating rotors that start where I'm pointing, and they're probably roughly, they're somewhere between 8 and 10 feet long, and that's where the crop is fed into. Crop's fed into these rotors, and of course we're just looking at one side. They're side by side. They are, I can't remember. This is a big frame combine. I think the small frame rotors are 21 or 22 inches in diameter. I may have to double check for you. This is a large frame. The rotors are maybe 27 inches in diameter. When we're cutting wheat, they turn it. You have different speeds for different crops. We'll just say they rotate roughly anywhere from, on a twin rotor combine, anywhere from 800 to 1200 RPM for thrashing. It varies on crop conditions. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So anyway, here I grabbed something so I could point at some things here. What I'm pointing at here is a removable piece that's called the Concaves. This piece is removable. There are different ones for different crops. This is a small wire concave for thrashing cereal grains, small crops, things like barley and wheat, small grains. You can't really, it's hard to see, but the rotating device then is on the other side of my concave here. And this part of the machine that we call the concaves, it raises up and down. The rotor, of course, as it spins, the rotor is stationary. It's spinning. This part raises up and down to the concave to vary the distance on your thrashing. Like, does it need to be, is it hard to thresh? You'll raise this up so it rubs it out harder. If it's easy thrash, you would move it down away from my rotating rotor for an easy thrash. So as this thing's spinning, your crop, your grain, your kernels, they're dropping through these holes here. They're dropping down. That's something I'll show you here in a little bit. And the crop is moved rearward as there's some stationary things inside of my, I don't know what to call it for sure, inside my rotor, inside the cage. There are vanes. This combine has adjustable vanes, but the vanes are set at an angle. So as the crop is fed in and the rotor is rotating, these angled vanes move the crop rearward. So the rotor is all, we got rotor back here. We're getting back to the rear of the rotor back here. This is also rotating, but we've got chaff and grain that is falling through the entire area. What she's trying to get a shot of here is the grain pan. As the chaff and grain fall down out of the concave, and it's falling down to where I'm pointing, there's a yellow rippled pan in there. It hasn't got all the paint wore off of it yet, but that's called the grain pan. It's got ridges in it, and that pan shakes back and forth pretty darn fast. The grain settles to the bottom. The chaff is kind of floating along to the top, and as this pan is shaking, it's moving all this material rearward. As it's moved rearward, then it's going to fall into another area that we call the sieves, and we'll get a different shot of that. But the sieves then is where a lot of the cleaning takes place. It's I don't know what she's getting a shot of there, but the grain falls through the sieves, and then there's an air blast coming up from below, coming out of what we call the chaffer fan. It's creating an air blast from the bottom. So the heavier stuff, the grain falls down through the sieves, the chaff and debris is lifted up and then blown out of the back of the combine, and that's how we separate the grain from the chaff. So, staying with the cleaning system a bit, as that grain then is falling through the sieves, which this is tilted down for just illustration purposes. These are our chaff spreaders. These are laid down. They should be more horizontal. But up into here is a shot, and hold it high as you can, Tracy. Get it pointed down. I'm sorry, guys, I never got it fired up to get all the crap cleaned out. But anyway, here's a shot of the sieves. The grain's falling down through this and getting cleaned as it goes. And as the grain falls down, there's an auger underneath here, which, step out here, Tracy. The clean grain falls down into this tube. There's an auger here that runs clear through the combine. The auger brings it out to this area. There's a cover here that I have off for cleaning purposes. And then there is what we call an elevator. There's a paddle elevator that takes the grain up and then deposits it into the grain tank. Because the combine, carries the grain until the tank gets full, and then you unload onto the truck or onto the cart. So we've kind of taken care of the grain process. The debris, the straw, all the debris then that is left over continues on through the rear of the combine. It goes through another device I'm going to call the rear beater, that when it gets out of the back of the rotor, this rear beater then, I know it's hard to explain what it is, but it's another shaft with some paddles on it that grabs all the leftover straw and debris, and it kicks it up through the rear of the combine up inside here, and then it drops down into what we call the straw chopper. And Tracy, you may get down in there and take a shot. We've got a rotating drum with knives that rotate, and this baby's going about, 3,500, 4,000 RPM. She's spinning fast. And as that thing spins and the straw comes through, if the straw gets chopped way up, it creates a big wind blast, and then these fins, veins, whatever you want to call them, they spread the residue out through the field. And this is more straw, and the heavier stuff, lighter debris of chaff and things that are coming then off the sieves, come down into the chaff spreader, which is spinning, and then it spreads the residue out into the field too. The chaff residue comes off of here, off of both sides, and it's getting spread throughout the field. So we've got residue we've got residue coming off these spinners and being spread, and we've got residue coming down through the straw chopper, and out through the veins and being spread through the field. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how crop flows through a machine. I find it interesting that even though this is a sophisticated late model combine, and all the new ones are, I'm not just talking about yellow, but I find it interesting that things really haven't changed much since combines have been invented. And I'm talking about the way things are cut. Even the very first cutting machines, like binders, bundles, and things of that nature, they still used a cutting system basically like this. This is better and faster and everything, of course. But this is how they've been cutting the crop since about day one. I mean, since mechanized harvesting, this has been it. Now don't message us guys that's telling me this is all 100% not right or whatever. I'm just telling you stuff off the cuff. And also, even though this is a modern combine, it's basically, a lot of it's the same. I mean, your thrash machines and your early combines, they didn't have twin rotors that run this way. It would have had a single, this isn't going to be the right thing to call it because we didn't call them rotors, but instead of having I don't know if this is even right, but instead of having a longitudinal rotor, they had what they called a cylinder that went crossways through the machine like this. But they also had the rasp bars in them. There was always something that was shaken to try to separate the grain. Even the earliest ones had the sieves that had an air blast coming through to clean the crop. There's the basic, I find it very interesting. The basics have been about the same for 75 to 80 years. But it was just the basics. What we have, I'll just point out a few things that we've got here in case anybody is wondering. This is the air intake for the radiator, the hydrostat cooler, the air conditioning condenser. This rotates to try to, when you're combining, there's dirt and chaff and straw blowing everywhere. So we've got this rotating with suction air coming down through here. We've got a little fan here that's trying to suck debris off of there. As it's spinning, this is sucking debris off to keep the radiator so you don't overheat. And suck down through here. Debris comes out there. It's a good system. New Holland kicks butt here. I mean, we don't have any issues with overheating and stuff like that. And then all this other businesses, we've got the rotor drives here run by a variable speed belt, shaft that goes through the two gearboxes, a gearbox for each rotor back inside here. Power also comes off this drive. This is a variable speed drive that runs the header for different speeds, speed up and slow down. Power comes from here to here, variable speed, then it goes to the other side to a clutch that engages and disengages the header, and then another belt comes down and eventually drives the header. The header has its own hydraulic pump that runs the draper belts, but it uses combine hydraulics to power the reel and the up and down on the reel and the fore and the aft on the reel. The part of the combine that holds the sieves, the louvered part that separates the grain, part of that system is sometimes called the shoe. And the whole shoe, shakes back and forth. These little arms here are part of the shoe which this moves back and forth, that moves those sieves, which is all part of the cleaning process. And something that New Holland has done for at least 10 years, they have had a self-leveling shoe, which when the combine's is on a hillside, this whole part of the combine in here with these sieves on it stays level. So it moves like this depending on the side slope of the machine. And you might ask, well, why do they do that? Well, in a typical combine from years ago, this stayed. If you were on a hillside like this was going to be like this, like with the rest of the combine. So the grain all went to one side. The grain, as it was being shook to the back of the combine, all the grain would be going to the downhill side, and chances are you were going to be throwing some grain on the ground. This whole system stays level. So if the combine's like this is going to stay level to keep the grain level, so you haven't got all the grain piled up on one side. And it works really good. I don't know how it stays together, because you've got that whole system that is moving like this while it's being shook back and forth like this, but it stays together. New Holland's got a good system here. So Tracy thought I should mention exactly what we were looking at here. This is a 19 model 8.90 New Holland. It's a class 8. It's a pretty good size machine. I think they make a couple sizes bigger. Physically, the combine wouldn't look much different, but it would have more horsepower. Physically, it would be about the same size. A lot of the features would be the same. So anyway, standing here on the left-hand side, just going to point out a few things. All this is part of the unloading system. We've got an auger inside here. That inside here is the grain tank, which holds about 400 bushel. There's a short auger here that lifts the grain up, and then the grain is transported through this long tube, and of course this swings out. We just haven't done it because we haven't, and it's unloaded into the truck or the grain cart. This is really a busy side of the combine. Boy, there's a lot of stuff happening here. But even though it looks pretty busy, pretty complicated, the mechanics that work on this stuff every day, it's not really bad at all. Not when you know what you're doing. So we've got the main drives coming off the engine, which supplies power for the main feeder drive. We've got belts coming down that run the straw chopper I talked about earlier. We got belts coming down. This assembly here is running the shaker shoe, the shoe that I had mentioned, that the sieves set in, the shoe that's going back and forth like this, shaking the grain out. We've got this tube on both sides, which is a nice New Holland feature. This is part of the return systems. Always at the rear of the grain system inside the sieves, where things are getting shook out, the very last section of the sieves has a little area called the returns. And what that returns does is if you've got some unthrashed grain, unthrashed heads that have made it to the rear of the sieves, that grain theoretically can fall down through the sieves into a little different area that's called the returns. New Holland's got a nice feature on these, on the return. Most combines, it falls into an auger. The auger brings it to the side of the combine, and then one way or another it's paddled back either either back up into the rotor area or down onto the pan to go through the system again through a rethrasher. Well, New Holland done something a little bit differently. When the unthrashed heads fall into the return auger, the auger has flighting that goes both ways. So by that I mean, from the middle of one auger, the debris is taken one way, and then on the other side, the debris is taken, the unthrashed heads are brought the other way. So I've got one of these on each side of the combine. The unthrashed heads are brought inside this little area where I'm pointing, and there's a little rotor in there with some rasp bars, and they will thrash the unthrashed heads. After those heads are thrashed, they're kicked up into this tube which has an auger in it. It comes up through this tube, and here's a little paddle that paddles it back onto that grain pan and back onto the sieves again to be separated. I got one of these on each side, and I've never plugged up a return. Not to say it can't be done, but in my almost 10 years of having this New Holland, I've never plugged a return, and I think it's because we've got two of them. It's sending the returns both ways, and that's another pretty nice feature that I don't know if anybody else really has that. Okay, so there was a couple other little things I wanted to show you, but I got to fire the thing up to show you. So we'll start this old girl up. While everything's getting fired up and the computer and everything is getting booted up, Tracy thought I should show you perhaps the joystick. Most of today's combines are pretty similar to this. I've got a button here to raise and lower the header, and also tilt the feeder house from side to side. I've got a button here that raises and lowers the reel on the header, and raises and lowers the reel, plus moves the reel forward and backwards. A button to speed up and slow down the reel if I'm not using the automatic part of the reel. Auger, swing out, auger, swing back, auger turned off, auger turned on for the unloading system. It's got like a cruise control. If you're in a nice uniform field, you can hit a button at a that I have a speed preset at. I can hit a button, the combine will lower the header to the proper height and then go with the speed I had preset. And buttons over here, we've got separator engagement, header engagement, throttle up, throttle down. If I get a slug in the feeder house, I can go through a procedure, press a button, the feeder house, that chain I showed you earlier will reverse, and you can kick most of the debris out. We've got settings for our GPS, our guidance, automatic reel speed, 4-wheel drive on this one, and then the controls for rotor speed, the chaffer fan speed, my vane adjustment, chaffer fan adjustment. The sieves you've heard me talk so much about, they open and close for depending on how much air you need to let through. If you open the sieves up a lot, you let a lot of trash in with the grain, so you adjust those sieves so you got to let some air through to carry the chaff and debris out, but you got to have it open enough so the grain falls down through. And then we've got more than I'm ever going to show you here in this screen that we have all day. Kind of gives you an illustration of some of the parts I've talked about. This is one of the rotors. This is the rear beater that takes debris off the rotor and shoots it to the back so it can go through the straw chopper. This is a screen that tells me the RPMs when I'm running. It tells the RPM of the chaffer fan, the RPM of the rotor, where my vanes are set. That the vanes, as you recall, are the things that help move the material to the back of the rotor. This is an illustration of the grain pan that is shaking the grain to get it to the bottom and getting the chaff to the top. And then these are illustrations of the sieves. There's top sieves and bottom sieves. and this tells me what all my settings are at. So we've got, when you're in the field, this is going to be set up many different ways, but this is what I have on one screen. I've got another screen that tells me moisture, how much, what the width is, what I'm cutting, farmer's name, crop settings. Like I said, there's like, oh good grief, this can be configured however I want. Each one of these can be configured how I want, because there's like 150 different things to choose from. This is a screen that when I'm in the field, it can tell me where I'm at, what I've done. It can tell me what my yield has been on a map. It can tell me moisture. It can tell me fuel economy, and then we're back to coverage again. I'm sorry you can't get a good shot of this. This is a neat feature. This is not going to show up in the video, but there's a camera in the grain tank, so I can watch the grain in the tank, and I can also got a screen on the very back of the combine that, like, again, I know you can't see it, but there's a screen on the back. It's essentially a backup camera. And then of course there's another screen here that can be configured how I would like. I've got engine hours, boost pressure, all this stuff you can see. And then we've got the last screen, we have it set up that tells us what we need to know for our guidance system. So I fired this up because I wanted to go to the grain tank, which I had closed up. Tracy's getting a video of this grain tank, the covers, how they open up. It's not completely waterproof by any means, but it helps keep a lot of rain out when the combine's sitting for a few days and a storm might roll through. So just another thing I wanted to mention, this is my second combine that I've had these, what we call LSW tires. That stands for low sidewall. And I've had really good luck with these tires. These are a 1100 45 by 46. Tracy can come over here to get an idea of the width. You know, the reason these have been so good for me is this combine is heavy, and it can hold 400 bushels of grain roughly. So 400, if wheat's 60 pounds a bushel, 400 times 60, that's what's that? That's 24,000. This base machine weighs, don't hold me to this, folks, but in the neighborhood of, give or take, I believe of 44,000 pounds. And these tires really, they carry the load. Other tires I've had in the past have a lot more sidewall, and by that I mean from the ground to the rim. I've had tires that have this much sidewall in them, and there's, in my opinion, there's too much flex, there's too much bounce, and the tires just don't hold up. And I've been extremely happy with these LSWs. They're rated heavy. I don't have hardly any squat. I'm running 35 pounds, and I've had good luck with them. That's all I'll say. And for anybody that kind of wonders, these tires, about $4,000 a piece, give or take. And then an interesting thing I was going to say, these rear tires on this four-wheel drive, they're a 750 65 by 26, which was also about the same size. It also says a 28L26. When I was introduced to combines back in 1975, the big tires on the combines back then were probably a little taller, but not as wide as this tire. So our back tires these days are about the size of the front tires of the olden days. So a few last things. We're up on top here, and guys, I'm going to say I haven't cleaned up here yet. It's been in the field, so what you see is what you get. So we're up on the back deck here, where we put our fuel in here. We put our DEF in here. We've got our engine air filter here. We've got the radiator and all the coolers inside this box here. We've got a European engine. It's an Iveco. I'm a little bit unsure. This thing's got about 500 horses, maybe just a little less. But here's our power plant. And then, just to give you an idea of what you have to step up here. So then, just to give you an idea, this is our 400 bushel grain tank. This is where the clean grain winds up, and the combine carries the grain here until it's full or until you want to unload. The dirty white box up front there, that's the satellite receiver, which acquires all the GPS information, tells us where it is, and if you got the guidance turned on, it steers us and all that stuff. And just a little bitty rectangle box under the satellite receiver is our camera for the grain tank. And then there's a light for the grain tank. And the perfectly round device that's there is a thing that tells you when your grain tank is full. But I can also tell when it's full by looking at the camera in the tank. So anyway, guys, without getting too long-winded, that's kind of a brief rundown of a modern-day combine. There's a lot of similarities between all the brands. They're a lot different, not the same, but the basic combine's not the same. So, thanks, YouTube friends. I hope I haven't bored you too much. Like I said, I'm not an engineer. I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy with a combine.
I hope you enjoyed that. I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I did see the very last segment, which was the windiest, and it did have some mic issues with the wind. So when I start going through the footage and wish that maybe the wind wasn't blowing as hard today, but hopefully you like it. Hey, Jim and I really hope that you enjoyed today's daily update. If you did, why don't you give it a thumbs up for us? We'd like to know that. And be sure to hit the subscription button and the bell notification so that you know when the next video is up and ready to watch. Thank you, and we're so glad you're along with us for the journey.